Welcome to the Jeffco DeAngelis Foundation podcast series focusing on school safety and security. My name is Kevin Carroll, Executive Director for the Foundation. Throughout this series, we will be engaging in informative conversations with local, national, and even internationally recognized experts in the arena of school safety. We will be exploring best practices in crisis preparation, response, and recovery, as well as gleaning lessons learned from these remarkable professionals. In special editions like today's with Lieutenant Brian Murphy, we will also be having conversations with people who personally experience school and community shootings. The Jeffco DeAngelis Foundation originated in Jefferson County, Colorado, with a deep passion for and relentless commitment to sharing best practices in school safety and security with first responders, as well as school and school district personnel. We, in partnership with Jefferson County Public Schools, support a one-of-a-kind training facility, the Frank DeAngelis Center for Community Safety. This former elementary school is now a premier training facility which has supported training for over 7,200 first responders. Our trainings encompass everything from the practical to the tactical, focusing on proven approaches to preparedness, response, and recovery. More can be learned about the training facility, our team of nationally recognized trainers, and the Foundation by visiting www.deangeliscenter.org. And with that, it's my true pleasure to welcome our special guest today, Lieutenant Brian Murphy. As many of you are aware, Brian was the first officer on scene on August 5th, 2012, after a 40-year-old white supremacist fatally shot 6 people and wounded 4 others at the Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us today is Mr. John McDonald, Executive Director of School Safety for Jefferson County Public Schools. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Kevin.
So, Brian, while many know you from the event we will be talking more about today, I'd like our listeners to have the chance to learn more about your career and background prior to that day.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Brooklyn, and right after high school, I joined the Marines. I traveled around. I was able to go on embassy duty, so I was in Afghanistan in '82 when the Russians were there. I was in Afghanistan for a year, then went to Thailand for a couple of years, then Sri Lanka for a little bit. As soon as I got out, got a job at the United Nations. Worked there for about almost 5 years. Had a awesome time, a lot of different jobs there. Did the control center, personal protection for the Secretary General, that type of thing. And then I moved out to Wisconsin. I started out in Jefferson County as a jailer before I moved on to Oak Creek.
Different Jefferson County.
Different Jefferson County, yeah. But yeah, I was out there for a year. I went through recruit school and got on with the Oak Creek Police Department.
So August 5th, 2012 is the day that everything changes for you. You respond to a call of shots fired at the Sikh temple, and you find yourself alone and in a gunfight. As you train responders from all over the world now, what do you tell them about preparing for the worst of days?
I think the one of the main focuses that I try to get on is complacency. The idea that it can't happen here, it's not going to happen now. It's that the one thing that I hit on is you really don't get to pick when bad shit happens. It picks you. It's not going to wait for your best day when you're most ready. It just happens. And that goes all over. I happened to be in D.C., and I was invited by the Secure Community Network. They provide security and training for all the Jewish community in all of North America, including Canada. So this was in October, 2 years ago, I think it was. At any rate, we were talking. I said, Mike, what's the biggest issue that you find in your community in the training? And he said, complacency. 2 weeks later, the shooting in the synagogue. And I waited a little bit, and I called and offered my condolences. And he said, the funny thing is, he said, now the training calendar is full. So that's what I go back to is you have to train now, you have to prep now. Doing it after the fact, while good, somebody or something bad already occurred that you could have, maybe you could have prevented had you just been prepped right.
We talk a lot, I know John and I and others, whenever we do trainings about hope. Hope is a bad strategy, right? And denial.
Hope's a four-letter word. You know, you got to look at it that way.
Yeah.
You know, if you were standing on a 4-inch balance beam between, you know, over the Golden Gate Bridge, would you hope a big wind doesn't come and blow you away? Or do you just not get your ass out there? You
Right.
prep and, you know, have yourself wired. And so you have backup plans. You have things. And the other part of the training that I go into is training to the point that when you're on autopilot, you make those good decisions. Because, you know, you talk to the guys, and I've been doing this, you know, if you count the military, I've been at this since 1980. And the one thing that I found to be consistent is you're not going to pull the move out of your bag 10 years after the fact. When you learned it once, never trained it again. Don't bother. That's why, you know, you always hear me talk about put your stuff where you can see it. Put your, you know, your vest where you can see it. Because if you don't practice getting out, going to the trunk and getting it, you're not gonna.
Well,
It's just a
that was the
fact.
first thing I said to you when we got out of the truck is my vest is in my front seat, just like you taught me.
Right. And again, the more you see it, the more you use it, the more you don't think about it. And those are the things that save you time. And those are the things, honestly, that save lives, is that being able to do the right thing faster. Wyatt Earp had this saying that goes on shooting. Shooting fast is good, but in reality, it's accuracy. So you need to be slow in a hurry. And it makes a lot of sense is if you train it and you do it, it becomes natural and it just flows.
It's that muscle memory, right?
Exactly.
Like anything else.
You were shot 15 times
Yeah.
that day. Where did you find the will to survive and live? I mean, what's the motivation at that point to keep fighting?
You know, probably the halfway point during this, there was a lull. And I remember closing my eyes for a second. I was trying to just get my bearings. And as soon as I closed my eyes, I saw my wife Ann's face. I make no bones about it. As soon as I saw that, I thought of my wife, I thought of my kids, and my immediate mental state was, I'm not going home on a parking lot. I'm not going to die in a parking lot. I'm going home. So I made a plan. I'm going to get back to my squad, and I just stayed focused on that. And going back to what, I just want to take a step back. One thing that we need to focus on is if you're not training, you need to remember the bad guy is. You know, my guy was at the range going through a couple 100 rounds a week. So they're prepping. And I'm not saying everyone is, because we just had a mass shooting at the Molson Coors plant in Milwaukee not that long ago. And he didn't necessarily prep like Paige did. But, you know, don't lose sight of the fact that don't rest on your laurels. Don't rest on, well, I have a gun and a badge, or, oh, we have a plan. Well, we don't practice the plan, but we have it because these guys do. The bad guy does. And you have to at least make a level playing field.
Yeah. So family for you was a really powerful motivator to keep fighting and not give up in the middle of that. Talk a little bit about the recovery process too, what that looked like.
I'd rather get shot again.
Yeah.
Honest to goodness, I would. And I think that's another issue that gets overlooked is, all right, you're shot, we're going to give you a plaque, we're going to give you a medal, and that's all good. But I lost, I don't know, half my thumb. And I remember being in the waiting room with the doctor, with my wife. I had a pin going through my index finger on my right hand. My left thumb was gone. And they take the casts off. And I remember early, that kind of funny thing, I asked the doctor, I'm like, how do you get that pin out? And he says, oh, we have a special tool for that. And, you know, some people take a general anesthesia and other people don't. I was like, all right. And remember, I can't talk at all. This is very early on, so I can just mouth things. But he comes in, he takes everything off, and I look down at my left thumb, and the skin is necrosed, so it's just fallen off, and it's black. And what I didn't know, though, was the pad of my thumb, where they had basically tried to fix it, was now hypersensitive. So even just blowing on it felt like a blowtorch. So he begins pulling the skin off my thumb, and I'm looking at my wife. I can't yell because I had no voice, so I'm just stamping my foot. And the doctor didn't know it was hypersensitive. And he actually said, he goes, "Oh, stop it, you big baby." And I thought, I'm going to fucking throat punch you. Seriously, if my hands were in a cast, I would just end you. So long story short, we go through this whole thing, and he takes it off. And by the end, all the skin's gone, and the sweat's just pouring off me. I'm white as a ghost. I have nothing left. And he says, "Oh, well, you want to take that pin out?" And I had nothing. So I just reached my hand up. And the special tool was a Craftsman pliers.
I was going to say pair of pliers.
Yeah, just pliers.
Cow.
And so it went from the knuckle all the way through to my wrist. And he just pulls it out. And I had nothing at that point. So as far as the recovery phase, I had to go through. We began with a feather on the pad of my thumb. And it took, I don't know, a couple months to get to where I could put my hand in a bowl of rice. And
desensitize it over time.
And it just did, but it was a long process. It was that I still get, every 3 months I get Botox injections in the scar on my neck. Otherwise, it'll tighten up. I'll have a harder time breathing. And I know, when I'm 90, I'll have the neck of a 40-year-old, which is a good thing, But other than that, I would say from, it happened August 5th, I was released 17 days later. It took probably a good 8 months till I felt good. But it's a long and slow process. Sure. And that's really, to me, that was really where, if I was going to be encumbered with PTS, this is where it was going to come from, was that relentless being in pain, that relentless not being the whole person you were before. So that was hard.
Sure. We had a chance to talk earlier about how now you reach out and support other people who may have gone through a shooting, and not only the physical recovery, but the mental pieces connected to it. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So Armor Express made my vest, and they offered me the position after I retired of being the SAVES program manager. So the one thing that gives me credibility is obviously being shot a lot. But the other part of it, and as we had talked about, that gets lost is it's not just the officer, it's his or her family.
Family too.
And when you look at it, and for me to say, if you're having an issue, you need to go get help. I've had people say, "Are you sure?" Yeah, and my answer is, not me. I'm not a professional. You need to get professional help. And while you're at it, bring your family. Because I do know officers that their children don't want them going back to work.
And scared, right? Worried for them.
But every night is a battle.
Yeah.
"Dad, please don't go. I don't want you to get shot. I don't want you to get killed." That they're in fear. They have PTSD. And it sometimes, as an alpha organization, what law enforcement is, we lose sight of that fact. So that's where I come in and either call me to vent or maybe help a department that has never experienced the shooting. What do we do? What do we look at? What's the long term? Those things I can at least assist with. And the more people I talk to, the more saves there are. You learn a little bit more every time.
Well, what a powerful message for you as a respected law enforcement, long-term person, to be able to say that to someone. Because oftentimes I think in that alpha type mindset, people say, "Oh, it's a weakness. if I admit that I need to see someone, right?
It is, but I go back to this. Yeah, but we just met physically today. So I have no idea what you experienced growing up. I have no idea what's in your wallet. So if while we were coming here, if we saw an accident, we could both look at that accident in two totally different ways. And I always talk to cops about that is, if you go there and don't automatically assume you're going to have the same reaction. And, and I'll look and you get that look in the audience like, yeah, nonsense. But then when you turn it and use it for what it is, if I go to an accident, and I did this, I went to a suicide. It was a 17-year-old, 14-year-old. Two girls stood in front of a train and just got decimated. My daughter was the same age and had the same color hair. And I had to pick that poor little girl's head up and bring it back. You think that left a mark? Absolutely, it did. But again, going back to the accident, what happens if that looked like your mom, looked like your dad, looked like somebody in your family? Don't expect that it always is going to be easy. And we're getting much better, I think, especially with Afghanistan, Iraq, understand that PTSD is real, and if it works in the military community, it definitely works in first responders because you see it day in, day out. And again, that's, think of the house of cards. Every time you go to a bad incident, it's more cards on top. And I guess that's the ultimate is that, unfortunately, when that breaks, we all look at that last card that caused that house to fall, but it's still
everything's
just
been building,
right?
Everything's been building.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there that say that we can't stop mass shootings. What do you say to people that say we can't do anything?
Well, here's the truth of the matter for me. I don't think you can necessarily totally stop it before it begins because I think one person, an anomaly, can make stuff happen. But almost every single shooter has had pieces that people missed. My guy, I know for a fact, the person who was renting a house out to him went and saw him a week before it, went up to the apartment. There was nothing in the apartment. It was August, and the windows were blacked out with garbage bags. And the guy's brother was a cop. And it wasn't until after the fact that he said, you know what, I should have called you because I knew that was wrong. So there are signs, there are signals, there are things. So you have, it's the bifurcation is you have the shooter, and that's being observant, looking around. People, my guy went to the temple twice beforehand. If it looks wrong, it is wrong. And the other part of that too is, how are you playing? How are you set up? How are you going to be the hard target or the soft target?
No.
That really hard targets. It's. I grew up in Brooklyn. I got mugged my first time I was in the third grade because I was an easy target. I was walking down a block with a big old bag of groceries. So the guy who mugged me knew, young kid, stuff in his hand, he's not going to run. After a while, you learn things like that, and you make things harder for the perpetrator. But you also have to be honest about things and realize, whether it's in the school itself where this kid's getting bullied. Maybe it doesn't rise to the level where administration is involved, but damn well those kids have seen it, been a part of it, and after the fact know in their hearts, you know what, I should have said something.
Yeah, or heard it, right? We talk about how they tend to broadcast in a variety of different ways, sometimes face-to-face, sometimes online.
Right, but it's out there. And that's the bottom line is that information has been revealed in one sense or another. It's up to someone to get that information and decipher it and at least step in. Is it going to stop it? I don't know. And I always say that when I do a presentation is you don't know when your time to get tapped on the shoulder and do the right thing comes. Whether it's that kid, you're a school resource officer or a teacher or an administrator, and the child comes up and says, hey, can I talk to you?
Answer is
If
yes.
if a kid comes up to and answer that, you're right. That answer is always yes. Because if you blow them off, and you may not see it as being blown off, but we've all been that kid asking for help in some way or another. And then when the answer wasn't, what can I do to help you? You felt even more alienated. You felt like this problem doesn't make sense to everybody else. It's just a me thing. So those, again, the opportunity to do the right thing is always there.
I think it's a good testament to the power of school resource officers that kids do build relationships with them and want to come forward, and then it's a nice direct line based on positive relationship as opposed to distancing sometimes when there's not positive relationships or school districts don't have the advantage of having school resource officers. I think it matters greatly.
Which I don't understand why nationally you have school districts now talking about eliminating the school resource officer because they provide a militaristic. You have to look at the benefits are much greater than any perception of them being the bad guy. I don't, at least for me, I don't ever see it that way.
I think it's community policing at its best. I can liken the SRO to the beat cop of the 50s walking the neighborhood. The SRO knows the community, the kids. They become that kind, caring, trusted adult for these kids that they can actually reach out to and say help.
And when the officer knows you by name,
Right.
it's not, oh, I can't say anything. He or she knows me.
Yeah.
Right.
And they come to the basketball games. They're there at dances. It's not always about a bad thing. And sometimes I think the focus gets misdirected.
I absolutely agree with you.
So let's talk a little bit more about the community in which the shooting happened for you and things you may have learned about the Sikh community following the tragedy that you might not have known prior to that time.
I was fortunate that when I was in Afghanistan, they used to send us every 3 months to New Delhi, India for R&R for a week. So I got a little bit of time in India and learned a little bit, a very small amount about the Sikh religion. On the Oak Creek side, we knew they were there. As a matter of fact, I was on the Homeland Security Unit, and we didn't focus on them because we had threats at a separate place of worship. So we focused on that. We had detailed plans. We had all that stuff. And we were just getting into this at this point as far as documenting blueprints, that type of thing. So after the fact was really when for lack of a better term, the Enlightenment came. What the Sikh religion is founded on, which is basically serve and protect. Why the sword is up as part of their symbolism is, again, protecting the weak. And, they rallied around me. They were there. They're still there. And I know you read it off as 6 people died, but Baba Punjab Singh, who was shot and paralyzed, he just passed last week. So the medical examiner put it down as complications from the shooting.
The shooting itself.
So it's 7. Yep. But even then, I went to the service for Mr. Singh, and it's amazing how supportive they are. And I'll give you a thing. So in the Sikh religion, there's this thing they call it Tradikala. And that means have an optimism in the face of great adversity. And I was very upset when Baba died because I always looked to him. Here's a man who was shot when he was 65. He was a quadriplegic, had a stroke, so he can only communicate by blinking. But he lived and even then had this great optimism, then felt that, God had chosen him to bear this burden and that he felt lucky. So days where, my thumb hurt or my throat hurt, and in my head, you're like, man, this sucks. But I always think of Baba and think, you know what? Here's a man who's bedridden, can't communicate, but, other than blinking, he has a better outlook than I do. Yeah. So who am I to feel sorry for myself? And it always made me get off that get out of the pity party and get back into things. And that's the way the Sikh feel, is that, you know what, adversity is just something to get through because there's better opportunities ahead. So I was very blessed to.
Powerful messaging.
Wow. There's a no-name campaign happening around the country when it comes to saying the name of mass shooters. You take a little different approach when it comes to naming the perpetrator. You talk a little bit about that.
I agree with it, and the no-name, the mass shooting we just had in Milwaukee, the Fox outlet used his name for one day and then said we're not going to say it anymore. And I thought that was a good thing. For me, most of the people that I talk to, I present to, are in law enforcement. So I think you have to know your adversary. You need to know about them, where they came from, how they trained. So I don't mind using it in the context of using it for an educational purpose, not for exploitive reasonings. And I like the idea of not saying their names over and over and over again. But the truth of the matter is, if I didn't use his name, would you remember it? Not really. We're unfortunately, we're at that point now where there's so many that you forget who's who or whatever. But I do agree with taking the notoriety away from it. But again, going back to training purposes, I think it's important.
Speaking of training, there is a kind of a national debate going on around training of students and staff in schools. Some saying that we shouldn't do it because it can be traumatizing to them. Others saying, no, it's critical, we have to do it. What are your thoughts on that?
Do you train fire alarms?
We do. And that brings up an interesting point too, right? Because part of when kids or staff can be traumatized is when people do reenactments as opposed to a drill. Just like when we do a fire drill, John would say, we don't light the building on fire. When we do a safety drill for an active shooter, we don't replicate an active shooter event at that time. With law enforcement, sometimes when we do some planning, we might do a larger event, but the actual training for students and staff, drill versus reenactment, and I think there's a lot of worry about any potential trauma that might come from doing it incorrectly.
And you're right. I was in Florida, and one of the people who was going to present after me did active shooter training and explained to me how he would go in with a auditorium full of teachers, bring in a bunch of SWAT guys dressed up as bad guys with shotguns, with planks, and just start shooting. And I said, well, now you lost them.
Right.
They're forever gone. You'll never get that back. And he said, you're wrong. And I said, maybe, but I don't think so, because if you overwhelm the senses, you overwhelm it, then you fear it. You know, there's a buddy of mine, Tony Blauer. He does this whole thing on fear, and even getting punched, and I can't do it, you know, where you can see it, obviously. But one of the drills was, you're safe. If I start swinging, you are absolutely safe until the punch actually connects with you. So you say safe, 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 unsafe. And it's the same principle. We would baby step that. We would walk around this whole thing so you understood how this occurs. Before someone swings, how does their weight shift? How does their shoulder shift? It's the same principles that if you baby step, and unfortunately, when you see it, it was already telegraphed and you get it. So you're building that cognitive resiliency. And I agree. It should be a drill. It should be something that is not feared. It's something, this is how, go back to the autopilot, you know, that this woman, Dr. Hartwell, did a study, 101 people involved in deadly force encounters. 3/4 of them went to automatic pilot. 3/4. So how is this not the same? If you drill it, and you drill it slowly, explain it, this is why we're doing what we're doing, and then you can speed up later on down the line. But as long as you baby step your way through it and understand the nuances involved and why you're doing it, then it's not overwhelming. It's just not. And I know, you know, Lieutenant Colonel Grossman goes through the fire alarm things, but he's right. We have But just like I was, if there was a fire alarm, what would you do? Your immediate thing would stand up, look for the exits. That's just the way we do it.
So being prepared, not scared, right, John?
Yeah.
There you go.
I think I should have coined that, or I should have trademarked that
You
thing when I
should have.
first coined it
You should
20
have.
years
It's
ago.
Absolutely appropriate.
You've had the opportunity to meet with survivors and responders of mass shootings all over the U.S. Do you find inspiration in their strength and in that network?
Oh, absolutely. There's you cannot not get inspiration from them because, it's a select, and I know it sounds horrible, but understand the context in which I'm saying it. It's a group that you're a very small group that is there. And it's a funny thing. Going back to talking to officers who've been shot in the line of duty, every one of them says, I feel like I'm on an island because nobody else has gone through what I've gone through. And it's the same in this, is that there are a lot of survivors out there who've been through this, and you'll only be able to bring strength. Don't ever look at it like, poor me. No, you've been tagged. It's your time. Now bring it forward, tell your story. And there's no harm in saying when it happened, I was scared shitless. And the pain I went through afterwards was devastating. But you know what? You're here. And I've always seen that shirt. Yeah, but did you die? And that's the truth.
Yeah.
If you didn't, you're here. My oldest daughter, she had a horrible year, the year of the shooting. And there was, my sister died, her mother died, and then I get shot all within us. And it was a horrible experience. She was only 22. She was over in Korea. And when she came back, and she's like, she was very upset. And then I asked, I go, but you're still here, right? Well, yeah. Then what are you bitching about? Because it's okay. It's okay to look at it and say that was bad, but that was then, this is now. If you went through that and you're still here, man, everything else is gravy.
And you've got something to pass on and share, right?
Exactly. And
make others
that's
strong.
That's what I tell her, is like, you have a resume, and if you want to call it a resume of pain, but it's still a resume. And your resiliency now is off the charts. So anything that comes forward that you think is bothering you, go back and put it in context, and you realize, wow, I'm capable of way more. So,
Speaking of inspiration and resiliency, our beloved principal, Frank DeAngelis from Columbine, just walked in. He's hanging out with us tonight. So thanks for being here, Frank.
Yeah. So you've partnered with the Hero 911 group. Can you talk about what that is and why it's important?
So the Hero 911 group, it's multifaceted. So the Hero aspect is for law enforcement, that they can download an app and any protected property, because there's a school guard 911 that schools could have, that if someone notices someone walking in the building, before it even starts, hit the button, goes directly to 911. Any officer within a 20-mile radius who has that app downloaded is going to be notified as to respond. And the one reason I love this, the whole app, is going back to my shooting. In our city, if you dial 911 on a mobile cell phone, it goes to Milwaukee County Sheriff, who has 37 jurisdictions to pick from. So then they have to figure out where it is and then send it to the dispatcher, tell the dispatcher. That's all time lost.
I was just going to say that's all
and
time.
that's seconds that, and Hero 911, it's seconds count. Seconds save lives. So for law enforcement, the Hero 911 app, it's free. For everybody else, whether it's a business or a campus or a school property, and they're live in all 50 states, having that ability to just press a button, which then goes to every single teacher within that school and every school within a 5-mile radius. So everybody's getting instant notification that is going to get direct information out as clearly as possible. So for me, when Nate McVicker, who's one of the founders, came to me and asked me what I thought, I'm like, this is a total no-brainer. As it just showed, there was that school shooting in California, and the 2 off-duty guys just happened to be dropping their kids off. But if they didn't, and that was a protected property, that's exactly the way it's meant to be, is get your boots on the ground as quickly as possible. And, again, if there's anything that is going to save lives, it's getting the right people at the right place at the right time.
We were talking a little bit about your opportunity in meeting survivors and responders, but, I've observed, having been around you for a couple of years, and certainly I put myself in this category. First responders often look to you and find inspiration. What does that mean to you?
I'll be honest with you. I still look at it like I just did my job. That's it. And I don't mean that to sound cliche, but there's a funny thing, and this goes back to a couple of saves I know, and they say the same thing. It's like, I don't get it. What's the big thing? I just showed up. They called. I came. I did, and that's it. So for me, sometimes I just don't get it. But I'm fortunate that I can talk to other people and they'll tell me I changed the behavior. I've had guys come up to me after a presentation say, I'll never go on the road again without my vest on. I'll always make sure my stuff is ready. And those are the things to me that we all need a reminder. From time to time, we all need a reminder on, one, why are you doing what you're doing? And are you doing it to the best you can? And if that's me and I can remind you and it stays close to home, that's awesome. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, my dad was a garbage man. My mom worked at a bank. All this stuff to me is just like, I don't get it. But if that's why I'm here, then that's what I'm going to do. And that's always going to be the way it is.
So it opens the door to the right conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, I think having that credibility to say there's nothing, there is no difference between you and I. None. It's just, what do you got in your wallet? What are you ready to do to get home? And we've all been in spots where it would be easy to give up. And to me, that's how you get to move further up the chain, is that if you give up on little shit, when big stuff comes, you don't be there. But if you don't, and that goes back to, good grief, my sister and I there was no cable, there was no any of that. We'd sit and have staring contests, practically till your eyes were like bleeding. But all that stuff, those little contests make a big difference in you.
Oh. So that's a lot of weight to have the world listening to you, looking to you for advice, and going out and sharing your experience with everyone. How about when you just unplug and just be you? What does that look like, relaxation for you?
Oh, my wife, pretty sure will tell you I don't relax. What I like to do the most is just be with my family. We run an antique store in Milwaukee, and my favorite thing is go back into my garage, break out the sander, and take an old piece of furniture and bring it back to life again, and rewire a couple of lamps and just make things better. My wife always says that you're a fixer, and maybe that's just me. So whether it's fixing a lamp or fixing somebody who has a problem, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that,
I think it's more than okay. I think it's wonderful. Well, thank you again, Brian and John, for your time today and for your daily commitment to keeping schools and communities safe. We certainly are lucky to have had the opportunity to learn from your expertise and your experience. This conversation has been brought to you by the Jeffco DeAngelis Foundation. More information about the foundation can be found at www.deangeliscenter.org.